Good evening, all, and welcome to the April 10th, 2025 working session of the Abington Township Board of Commissioners. The first item of business is a motion to approve the minutes from the working session of January 9, 2025, and I so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, minutes are approved. We have two presentations tonight, so I'm going to hold public comment until after the presentation, so you have the chance to hear them in full, and then we will entertain public comment at the end. So we're going to shift right into new business. We have two items tonight. The first item is a presentation of an ordinance amending the code of the Township of Abington at Part 2, Chapter 162, by amending and restating Article 3 and the use matrix appendix to include the G3 art gallery or museum use as a permitted use in the R1 low-density residential district, and Article 11 or 21 to establish regulations for the G3 use where located in the R1 low-density residential district. So, Manager Chrisman, is there anything you want to say, or should we invite the speakers forward?
At this point, Mr. President, I would invite the speakers forward
Okay.
unless, of course, the Solicitor's Office wants to provide a quick overview before they get started, but
No, I just simply to say the township was approached by the property owner with the possibility of this project. We looked at the project, we realized that there would need to be a zoning change in order to permit this. And working collaboratively with Attorney Von Spreckelsen, we've come up with the draft ordinance this evening. I think Attorney Von Spreckelsen will express one issue with the ordinance that she doesn't agree with. And then that will be up to the board to decide whether or not they want to leave that in there or whether or not they want to take that out. And then as we get ready to possibly move it for advertisement next month.
Okay, thank you, Solicitor. Good evening, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Julie Von Spreckelsen from the law firm of Eastburn and Gray. Here tonight to discuss, as your solicitor stated, an amendment to the R1 district, which is the low density residential district, and that is to permit a use G3 art gallery or museum use by right in that zoning district. And as Mr. Clark stated, there are a number of use regulations that have been added to this use for the purpose of allowing it to be permitted in the R1 zoning district. And I want to go through those regulations because they're really important. They put limitations and restrictions on the use so that it could be permitted in the R1 district. So Section 2 of the draft text amendment goes through those limitations. What it does first, though, is it states the use G3 art gallery or museum use, and it provides the provision that exists in the ordinance today. And what exists in the ordinance today with regard to that use and its regulations is it provides first a description of what that use is, and then there's a subsection that states that an art gallery shall not exceed 3,000 square feet. Again, that's already in the ordinance. The second section defines what a museum is. So a museum is a building or place open to the general public with entry provided for free or a fee where works of art, scientific specimens, or other objects of permanent value are kept and displayed. Again, already exists in the ordinance. So what restrictions and limitations we put on this use to allow it in the R1 are as follows. First and foremost, an art gallery use would not be permitted in the R1 district. And basically the reason for that is because that would allow a retail component. So you could, that's the definition basically of the art gallery. You could have a retail component to it. So there could be sales, and we felt that maybe sales wouldn't be appropriate in an R1 district. The museum use is the definition I just read to you, and there's no retail sales permitted with the museum use. So that's a restriction and limitation. The second subsection states that a minimum gross lot area of 10 acres shall be provided. In the R1 district now, the basic requirement for lot area is 1 acre. This is 10 acres. So we're making sure that this use, when it's in the R1 district, it has sufficient area and it's appropriate for the district. So that's another limitation on it. The next section talks about that it could be two principal uses on the lot. So it could basically constitute a second principal use. In the R1 district, there's a number of uses that are permitted. One, the single family residential. So if somebody was fortunate enough to have an extensive array of art collection, I think it's beneficial to the township that they would be able to have this use associated maybe with their dwelling. Also allowed in the R1 are places of worship, municipal complexes, and also colleges and schools. And so I think a museum very much is compatible with those types of uses. So that you could have that kind of use along with the school, with the municipal complex, with a religious a place of worship. They may have some religious artifacts, that type of thing. It's very compatible. So it makes sense maybe that it would be permitted in the R1 district. The next limitation is on the hours of operation. So the museum shall have limited public operating hours of 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And then finally, the last provision states, and it starts out by saying as part of a conditional use approval, but what it states is that the Board of Commissioners may reduce the parking requirements where good cause is shown that the museum will adequately be served by the modification, and it will reduce the environmental impact of the use. So right now, the parking requirement for this type of use is one space for every 350 square feet of exhibit area. And so what that portion of the text amendment is saying is that if it can be proven that that many parking spaces aren't really necessary, then there can be a reduction in the number of spaces. And that would be so that there would be less impervious coverage on the site. So that would be the environmental benefit to the site. But as I indicated, this is a use that I feel is compatible in this district. It's low impact, it's beneficial, it's a philanthropic endeavor. If there is such a collection that is available for display, I think it's a public benefit. Something maybe that the public wouldn't be able to see elsewhere would be available to them. So circling back to how this use is permitted. So as Mr. Clark stated, this is the one provision I want to try to make a case for, because as the ordinance is drafted now, it states that it would be permitted by conditional use. And so to permit it by right would make sense to me, because when I first looked at the ordinance, I did a real deep dive into where this use is permitted. And it's permitted in 12 districts by right. By right, not conditional use. It's permitted in 12 other districts by right. So it makes sense that it would be also permitted by right here. Additionally, as I had mentioned, there's a number of limitations on this use. It's very restricted. And so those types of limitations and restrictions are a lot of times placed on a use when you attend a conditional use hearing. Well, now they're already built in. So they're already built into this use. So maybe a conditional use hearing would not be necessary because you already have the protections that you would add during a conditional use hearing. Again, it's permitted in so many other districts by right. It just would make sense and be consistent with the other provisions in your ordinance that it would be by right in the district. So that is our presentation, and just asking that we move forward in the process and hopefully send it on, if the commissioners are so inclined, send it on to the County Planning Commission for review and schedule a hearing date.
Okay.
But if you want to.
Is there something else you guys wanted to say, or
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
yeah. So,
you just introduced yourself even though?
yeah, my name is Michael Markman. I live at 900 Morgan Road, Jenkintown, Rydell, PA 19046. What brings us here tonight is my business partner, Bruce Toll. I'm here to represent him. He's been a resident of Abington for over 50 years. I've been a resident of Abington for over 30 years. And over time, Bruce has just developed a real affection for the township, and he's also actually become an avid art collector over the last 50, 60 years. And what he could do is he could take his art collection and donate it to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and it could be a Bruce Toll wing of the Philadelphia Museum of Art. He doesn't want to do that. He's also got an extensive sculpture collection. So it's mostly paintings and sculptures. And because he has an affection for Abington, he wants to create a museum here in Abington to display his art that would be run by a foundation that he created. And, he feels that, this would be, this is part of his legacy, and he would enjoy, bringing his art together. He has several houses now, but he would bring the art together in this museum so that people of Abington could go and view it. And, it could be something that could be a benefit, a cultural benefit to the township. And frankly, I live a couple blocks from here, from where his house is 1000 Meeting House Road. And, I absolutely think it would be a great idea because, you're looking at a property that's extremely large. It could be subdivided into houses. It's a beautiful property. And to put an art museum and a sculpture garden there in a philanthropic way is something that I would like. And it would actually kind of put us on the map as having, a substantial, museum for the people to kind of go and see. So that's what really brought this up, and that's why we're here. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Acker, can I ask a question of Ms. Von Sparkelson?
Of
and
course.
then just point something out to the board?
Yes.
Ms. Von Sparkelson, you indicated that this use is currently, or that's my question, I guess, is permitted in 12 other districts by right. Is that currently or after we would adopt this ordinance?
No, it's currently,
Okay, so in 12 other districts, this use is permitted by right.
correct.
Okay, and just the other clarification, board members, I think subsection E is important because it's essentially what it is saying is if the applicant can demonstrate that they don't need all the parking out there that they might normally need, it's within the board's discretion to reduce the amount of parking out there. So but the burden will be on the applicant to show that they don't need all that parking. And that may be done by showing that the hours of operation may not be 10 to 10, maybe more limited. It may be by people can't just show up here, that it has to be by an appointment, or so they're not going to have like a flood of people needing parking there. But that burden will be on the applicant, but that's an important section there.
Got it. Thank you, Solicitor Clark. Did you wish to make a further comment, or are you?
Nothing further.
Okay. I'm going to open it up for comments and questions, but let me just reiterate. So this happens to sit within my ward. And Mr. Toll had reached out at last summer, I believe it was August or September of last year. And I had the opportunity to talk with him and Mr. Markman and others about this. And it's a unique opportunity to retain a cultural asset within the community and perhaps, protect a parcel of land that, interestingly, the original owners of that parcel date back to the founding of Abington Township. It's fascinating. So the Hallowell family, the family that incorporated SPS Technologies back, but the earlier ancestors of that family, lived in Abington in the 1800s. So it's one of the last tracts of land in the township that's just completely pristine. It is beautiful. It's a park like itself today. And, at some point, Mr. Toll could choose to sell that property, and by right, they could subdivide that land and put a lot of houses over there that may or may not be the right move for the community. And so this is an opportunity, while affording the township the protections to ensure that these things don't pop up everywhere, but it affords us the opportunity to retain what I think is an important cultural asset and make it available to more people, not just here in the township, but in the surrounding region. So with that, I'll open it up, and Commissioner DePlacido, please go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Hecker. Just interested to know if any of the residents have been contacted about this, if they know what's going on over there, about the plans.
There is, I mean, I'll let the applicants speak for themselves, but.
I know it's R1 and it's
We're-
pretty
Yeah,
spread out.
there's actually not, I mean, there's no plans in front of the township. It's just an ordinance
Yeah.
that would allow it. Then we'd have to come in and, do land development approval. And the residents would have the opportunity to, be involved in that.
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm wondering if, if anyone's reached out to the people in the area and just told them about the plans initially.
Well, there's no plans right now. We're trying to get the zoning, and once if we do in fact get the zoning, then there will be plans, but there's no plans have been developed at this
All
point.
right.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a plan and.
No,
it's an
no,
R-
it's-
it's
we
an
we would
R1
like to do a
district that-
museum. We'd
that-
like to do a museum, but there's no plan. I mean, at this point, if you do the zoning, then a plan will be developed and there'll be a normal process where the residents will be notified and they can come in and, have input.
Yeah. I'll
So-
get to it.
Well-
Commissioner, if the board were to authorize advertising of this ordinance, it would be advertised, I believe, and I'll just double check our ordinance and get back to you on this, but I think the property will have to be posted. So there will be steps in that regard. So at this stage, there is just a concept of a zoning ordinance change, so nobody would have been required to be notified.
I totally get that. I really do. And I know there is no plan, but there's an idea. And I think it's important that, before all the advertising happens and occurs, that the residents know about it. So they're not lined up outside and saying that they don't want this here. Or they do want it and support it. I mean, it could go either way. It's R1. It's sacred. It's residential. And any changes to a residential area should be made aware, all the residents in that area should be made aware.
So we actually have a by right plan that we developed when we bought the property for 25 single family homes. So it could be developed for 25 single family homes on this piece, which would be a tragedy, but that could happen by right now. Land development, come in, subdivide and sell McMansions to 25 different people. So.
No, I totally agree. And I would love an art museum. My wife's an artist, my daughter's an artist, and I think it would be fantastical. But again, it's R1 and the idea, the plan, whatever, I had development in my area and I made sure that every one of the neighbors were notified before anything
Yeah.
was inked and any advertising was done and any meeting was set up. Because I wanted them to know ahead of time that this is what we're thinking about.
Ms. Von Spreckelson, if the board would have authorized advertisement of this, would you agree that we can agree upon a number that notices would be sent to property owners within, to determine what the distance will be, that it's been advertised?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Schreiber, and then get to this side of the board, and then Commissioner Henry, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, if the conditional use versus the by right that is the sticking point for you, is the process the same as far as going to county planning, coming to our planning? Like, are the steps the same? I don't know if that goes to you or to you, but.
Well, you can take a shot, and if I disagree, I'll.
Well, in order for the ordinance to be adopted, that needs to go to the county for review. So this ordinance amendment would have to go to the county for a review, and we need a public hearing on that ordinance amendment. So that's sort of like the conditional use process, same thing. Conditional use would then be at a public hearing as well. So we'd be doing it twice, basically, if it was required by conditional use.
And would they give input to that? The county plan, that's the next. step.
County, yes.
Yes,
County will,
If
yes.
it's the continue,
Commission is going to give input on the ordinance, whether or not it contains the conditional use procedure or not. If the ordinance is adopted and the applicant wants to submit its plans for review, the local and county planning commission will review that as well.
either way,
My microphone is on. I'll move it closer.
either way, it's,
Either
Either
way,
way.
that they'll review it. The only difference is that if it's by conditional use, the applicant, we'd have to go through a conditional use hearing.
so there'd be a
where-
double step.
Where there would be, the criteria that they would have to to meet. And again, I think as we've discussed in the past, I think people sometimes have the misconception about conditional use. It doesn't mean we can place a lot of conditions onto the plan. It means they have to meet a set of criteria that's in our ordinance, and our conditional use criteria for the most part is pretty standard. There's nothing unusual that would necessarily impact this project.
And I have one other question. Did and maybe I misunderstood what you said. Did you say that in the ordinance currently, there is a way of regulating how many people come in at a time, or it's by appointment or tickets or something, so that there's
There
not
does
that?
contain that. What my point was that if the applicant, there may be certain things that the applicant may need to show if they are desiring not to put in as much parking as would be required by our ordinance. And those were just two examples of what they could potentially show if they wanted to do that, if they wanted to limit the parking. Clearly, in the discussions with Ms. Von Spreckelsen over the drafting of this ordinance, they don't want to put in the amount of parking that they're going to be required to, because it's a lot of parking.
Mhm.
It could be, but we could meet that parking requirement certainly, but it would be a lot of impervious coverage.
So it would look more park-like and a prettier setting for the sculpture garden stuff if we could reduce the parking. But then,
Yes.
to your point, then we might want to reduce how many people could come in at a time.
Could be. That
Could
be.
That could be one thing that they could be looking.
Possibly.
Yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rothman and Commissioner Youngert, and then Commissioner Henry, and then Commissioner
Thank you.
Spiegelman.
And some of the questions may be for Michael. I know that Michael is sort of speaking on behalf of someone else, so I guess we do your best, right? So I think it's obvious, right? By right, stuff that can be done here by right sounds pretty bad. Let's just be honest. So I mean, I think in the concept of not making it a massive parking lot, doing lots of work and all that kind of stuff, that's obviously all in theory. Is there some sort of, and to Jimmy's point, I know we're sort of mincing words. There's a concept or a desire or something somewhere, right? Is there any objection to making it, if we went down to make it more limited, or a certain amount of people by a certain time, so that that parking lot as it is right now, and however it would be restructured, some reconfiguration would probably be required to make it not something where it's thousands of people. I understand it's unlikely, right?
Yeah,
But-
it's not going to be meant to do that. I don't know. I mean, honestly, we haven't drawn anything up. It's gonna have to be an assessment of what art's gonna go there, and then the size will be determined. So it's kind of a work in progress, but we can't even start there unless we have that zoning. And it'll be a process where you'll talk about, okay, this will be the building. This is how many people we expect. This is why we think there'll be a certain amount of parking, but nothing's been drawn up at this point. So we don't know, but this is kind of the first step to look in that direction.
I mean, you've sat up here, right? And I'm sure you understand some of the dynamics of, well, okay, talking to residents like, oh, it could be 25 houses. Wouldn't you prefer this? And then people say, no, it's going to be thousands of people every minute, right? And it's clearly not realistic.
No.
But I think that the dynamic of, I think, concern, for lack of a better term, on our end would be wanting to have some sort of limited component to it, and at least discussing with residents that there isn't that need for sounding the alarm. So I mean, I think that's, again, I think we're really in a hypothetical, but my word is right across the street there, so I'm picturing.
So I live
conversations
less than a
folks.
quarter mile from there. And honestly, if I would like to have this there, because I don't want to see that property. It's a beautiful property.
Yeah,
And this will create a use there where it won't be overdeveloped, where it could be overdeveloped. And I intend to live in my house, until I can't go upstairs.
Right.
So, and I think
wait, you can still go up your stairs? Good for you.
yeah, there's, it's allowed in 12 different districts already in the township. This would just be, and it has to be 10 acres at least.
Yeah.
And then you have to meet all the other requirements that are included in that. But so if this were to pass, a plan would be drawn up. And it would go through the complete process where everybody would come and weigh in. And honestly, you know, I haven't developed here in a while. The last thing I did was the CHOP building. And we listen. I mean, we listened with the CHOP building. We listen with pretty much every development we do in most townships. So, you know, we'd work with the board, we'd work with the township to make sure it's something that's palatable to everybody. You know, if the board says they don't want to go down this road, you know, that's understood and, you know, Bruce Toll will take his art elsewhere. But I like the idea of having it here. And it, you know, this is not, you know, it's art that has value and, you know, he wants his legacy to be sharing that art with this community, not with the Philadelphia Museum of Art, but the Abington community where he raised his family and where he lived for over 50 years. So.
Yeah, I mean, we often run into the accusation that we're looking for more development. And I think
This is
that-
actually less development, so.
that's what I'm
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of getting at is
Yeah.
that this might be an opportunity to show that we're not looking for
I think so, but
more development.
what do I know? I'm a developer. I could make a lot of money selling 20. I tell them, okay, you know, build 25 houses there, you make a lot of money, but that's not what he wants.
Well,
So,
thanks for answering my questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Young.
Yes, actually, some of my questions have already been addressed and all, but getting back to the conditional use issue, real estate 101, I think my understanding of conditional use is an exception to the zoning laws that would allow a use that's not currently permitted, and it could be very well for the benefit of the community. Actually, I was thinking of the Barnes Foundation, what is that, it was in Ballackinwood, and it was, this just reminded me of that whole thing, but I'm trying to understand what the compelling reason would be to make this, to not go the route of conditional use, because with that, wouldn't we have more of an opportunity for the public to weigh in, which was Commissioner DePlacido's concern?
So, respectfully, conditional use is a use that is permitted by conditional use. It is not a non-permitted use that you would need a variance.
Okay,
If
okay,
it needed a use variance, it would have to go to the zoning hearing board. But a conditional use, a use permitted by conditional use comes to the Board of Commissioners.
okay.
So the issue here is that they want to create this use in this zone. And the issue is whether it's a by right or whether it needs to go by conditional use. As of now, if they wanted to do this use, they'd have to go to the zoning hearing board to get a variance, but they're attempting to do it by a zoning change, an amendment. And in some ways, it allows the township to control what could go there better than if we just let them go to the zoning hearing board. And if they got their variance, well, the zoning hearing board could place these certain conditions on them. But by creating the potential ordinance with the applicant, we're able to put the things in that we want in this
Okay.
ordinance.
Oh, and the other one, does the current code differentiate between an art gallery and a museum? Are there two separate definitions? Forgive me, I don't know. Are there two separate definitions currently for art gallery and museum? And just so that I have an understanding of what you're trying to accomplish here is only a museum, so as you said, there won't be a retail component. So is that parsed out currently in the statute, art gallery versus museum in that manner?
It is, if you go to section 2103.G and under the use G3, It talks about the art gallery or museum use, and it gives it a general overview of what that use is. And then if you go to subsection 2, it specifically defines the museum use. And the museum use does not have a retail component to it.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Henry, then Commissioner Spiegelman, who has been waiting patiently, I might add.
Very patiently and silently.
Hold on, we got one more before you.
Silently, absolutely silently. My first question was, what Commissioner Youngerts just asked. I'm also wondering like how many properties, there's a little bit of a reference to other properties, but how many properties, in Abington would even, fit under that umbrella? Like who else does this affect? I love this. The property is absolutely gorgeous.
So again, with the requirement of the 10 acres,
Mhm.
I think probably I've looked at the zoning map and it's a little hard to tell without doing an analysis and measuring out and, going on Board of Assessment, I guess, and trying to figure out all the different properties and their minimum or their lot area. So, but I would say the vast majority of the properties are not 10 acres in the R1 district, but there are a number of them that are. Sorry, I can't be more specific than that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Spiegelman, then Commissioner Bowman.
Thank you, President Hecker. So Commissioner Youngerts she sort of took my cultural reference, but I know I've met more than one person, more than one family who are relatively recent transplants to Lower Moreland Township, no, excuse me, Lower Marion Township, who are not from this area. One of them, I actually told them that, some decades ago, they could have been neighbors with the Barnes Foundation, and they were astonished and dismayed. I know there are still people who lament the loss of that incredible cultural resource. And I got to say, this notion, I think I'm very excited about the idea. I certainly, I heard Ms. von Spreckelsen's arguments regarding by right use, and that's one by right versus conditional. I sort of have to work through my head, but the notion of Mr. Toll's vast art collection being something that lives in Abington and is open to the public. I gotta say, it's a really appealing idea. And also, that means I'd finally get a chance to see inside his house without trying to trespass on his property, because I've always wanted to get a look in there. So
Actually, the museum will be a separate structure. I don't think you'll ever see the inside of the house.
you know what? Nothing ever works out for me. Again, this is really exciting. And, I know, obviously Mr. Toll's property is one of the larger single family properties in the township. The idea that would be preserved that's an incredible notion. So I'm intrigued and excited by this, looking forward to hearing more. And I personally will just be sort of weighing the by right versus conditional use. But anyway, that's what I wanted to share. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Spiegelman. Commissioner Bowman?
I support the concept of adding it by conditional use. I think that makes sense in light of the other institutional uses that the attorney cited. And I'd be appreciative of the Toll's generosity in the past. We all love them here in Abington, the hospital and everything else. And it's a beautiful idea. I support it every way.
Thank you, Commissioner Bowman. Other comment, Commissioner Laney Martin?
I think it's a fantastic idea. I support it by right. I don't think it needs to have a conditional use.
Thank you. Commissioner Weingarten, you look like you're itching for the trigger.
Thank you. Good to see you, Mr. Markman. It sounds like a good use, and it sounds like, I appreciate the educational and cultural part of this. It sounds like you've made some pains, to say that there's no retail component to this. But does anything in this prevent you from charging for people coming on? Is the intention to have an outside sculpture garden so the public can walk around, or is this
something else envisioned?
You know, I'm not sure. I mean, I think now it'd be limited hours, but I think that's all something that'd be further developed if the zoning were in place and that we'd have a give and take with the board and with the community to see what makes the most sense. But, you know, Mr. Toll intends to keep living there. So I think if the museum were built, he probably wouldn't want people to come on only really limited hours. And as far as charging, I think that just haven't even been thought of yet, but maybe just to maintain it. I mean, it's not a profit oriented thing, but you know, enough to kind of pay for the, you know, the bills, the heating and everything else.
I mean, is that something that can be discussed during conditional use? Maybe that's a question for you, Mr. Solicitor, or is it?
So again, not really. If it's by conditional use, it's just the listed standards in our ordinance. It doesn't allow us to start imposing certain conditions
Yeah.
on the project.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, the one thing I can say is there's not a lot of philanthropists out there that are volunteering to put their extensive art collection and to build a building to house it that would be open to the community. And when he told me this, I said, are you nuts? Because just to build it is a costly endeavor. And then to take what this is his love. I mean, this is probably the thing of most value he has in his life. And he wants to put it in this museum. And you know, I was taken aback by it actually, that this is what he wanted to do. So I'm excited to have it here. So that's just, if he can just add that to the kind of the equation. So,
Okay, thank
yeah,
you.
thanks.
Commissioner Schreiber.
Well, sort of is the next step to have this go to our regular commissioner meeting? And do we have to make that decision about the conditional use before that?
Well,
Or
if we were
is
going to
that added
advertise,
there?
we would need to be clear about what it is we were advertising.
So I'm just asking the next step now,
So the next.
because
step
I
is-
think it's a great concept, so I want to see what happens with it.
This is this is our working session, so this is not a voting meeting. So the next step is if the board desires, this will be put on the May agenda. The draft will be in front of you to authorize advertisement. You don't need to make a decision on the conditional use aspect of it tonight. But if you wanted to direct my office and the manager to remove the conditional use aspect or leave it in, you can do that. Or you can debate it the night you're gonna determine whether or not you're gonna advertise it. And then whatever you advertise, whatever you decide that night will be advertised.
Any further comments or questions? Okay. So we don't vote at this meeting, but we will confer and then get back in touch. But I mean, there's clearly support for the concept, and the idea of working out the details will be part of us moving the process forward. But I appreciate Mr. Toll's interest. I mean, I will say, I did have the opportunity to get a tour of some of the art that he has here in Abington as compared to the other locations, and it's stunning and historic. And there's an educational component to this that I think the schools could tap into in a very meaningful way, you know, as part of art education. And so I think we'll have to think holistically. We have to make sure that it makes sense for the community, but I agree with the idea that, you know, here we have somebody that's devoted their life to the community that wants to leave a lasting legacy that will exist well beyond his time. And I'm supportive of that concept. Yeah. Okay. I think we're good.
Maybe we could also sort of figure out how many properties, if there's a way to do that.
There is, and
That-
so for
yeah,
sure.
how many properties could be subject to this, how many 10-acre properties, and just so we have a better understanding of.
Yep.
I find it hard to believe that 100 museums are going to pop up in R1. I mean, I find that hard to believe, but, you know, just
No.
to know, you know.
And that was the point of why I think the conditional use.
Yeah,
is
yeah,
not
understood.
necessary. It's
Well,
10
clearly we have to discuss that aspect of it further, which we'll do. And, you know, my thought would be we do that in the context of the next meeting. Okay. All right. Thank you. Much appreciated. Likewise, thanks for the time. All right, we'll do public comment again for those who want to speak. We're going to do it at the end of this second presentation. And The second presentation is we're going to be reviewing an ordinance amending the code of the Township of Abington at Part 2, creating Chapter 89, food trucks and mobile food vendors, to provide regulations for the operation of mobile food vendors. And we have the esteemed Chris Platts with us here tonight to share with us the background. Chris, good evening. The floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioners. Township Manager, appreciate you having me out tonight. I won't take up too much of your time. I know it's getting long to the evening. What you have in the working session agenda packet is my proposal for a mobile food vendor licensing process within the township. I'm sure you've all seen them pop up here and there. It's grown a bit more common nowadays. And right now, our enforcement mechanisms, specifically for the safety of the residents of the community, are pretty limited in this. I have lots of building codes, but unfortunately, building codes don't impact vehicles. So what we proposed is pretty much a two-part process. I'll just summarize this really quickly for you and let you read it later on for those who haven't already. But there's two portions to it. One is the actual mobile food vendor themselves, the licensing of those. They'll have to register like any other business in the township. They'll have to get an inspection from someone from my team. They'll have to register as a business, pay all those privilege taxes to make sure that they are abiding by all the rules that we have and operating safely. I've seen quite a few vehicles with some questionable processes, some questionable conditions that are of concern, but I'm kind of limited in what I can do. The second portion of this is a location process. There's two opportunities in here. One is a host business process where a business within the township can sponsor a food truck or food trucks to locate themselves at their business. Commonly, you might see things like gas stations. The hospital across the street likes to have them for their staff occasionally. But this will allow us to kind of control when they can operate, where they can operate, to make sure that they're abiding by things like property setbacks, clearance from combustibles, from structures, from flammable gases, all those things like that. There's also the single-use event, which is kind of like food truck festivals, or if one of you wants to have a food truck at your house for an event, there's a parameter in how we build that in there to allow those things to happen within very controlled, to look at things like noise, population increases for those. Parking's a big concern. We have these spots that I'm conscious businesses want to have a new revenue source come in, and I get that, but we have to make sure that it's not going to negatively impact their business or the surrounding businesses as well. Just a couple highlights where the host businesses would allow it to happen is our BCs, our main streets, and our suburban industrials. The residential would only be allowed through a single use, so that's something that they'd have to apply for individually one at a time. Other locations are permitted under special use, so that's where you get a review from myself and the zoning officer in that, looking at, are they complying with all the other parameters? Is it safely possible to do this? And then there is no operating in the public right of way. So no parking on the streets or anywhere blocking the sidewalks, things like that. A couple highlights just to go through. They have to provide us with things like a site plan that goes through trash receptacles on site, making sure they're not blocking vehicles or they're not making unsafe egress pathways. One thing we did include in there, our zoning officer was adamant in the residential, when we have a commercial property that abuts a residential property, we increase the separation requirement because we are cognizant of the noise and things that go along with that. Numerous parameters for those. The hours of operation will be between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. And then they must comply with all other township regulations as well. So it's a pretty robust ordinance. We worked with the solicitor's office to compile it and pick things from other municipalities that I've seen work, that I've seen not work, to really create something that I think would help us allow these businesses in a safe way in the community, while also not making sure that we're not negatively impacting other businesses in the community as well. So that's my quick 3-minute pitch. I'll take any questions.
We appreciate it. That was helpful. We'll open it up and we'll start with Commissioner DePlacido.
Thank you, President Hecker. Chris, thanks. I read the ordinance. I just had one quick question.
Sure.
So say 3 third graders from McKinley Elementary want to set up their lemonade stand, on a semi-busy street and maybe sell soft pretzels too. Are they going to get busted?
I do not plan to do that, no.
We heard the chief weighed in from the back of the room.
No.
I'll let them enforce that one then.
All right, thanks.
That's funny. So no, they will not be busted?
No.
Commissioner?
Lemonade stands and
Okay,
Girl Scout cookies are safe.
okay. Other comments or questions for Chris while we have him? Commissioner Weingarten?
Thank you. Good presentation, great presentation. Is there currently a problem? I mean, that we're trying to legislate it? Like, what
Yes.
what are you finding? What are the issues currently?
Yeah, so we have had quite a few food trucks, one, reach out to us and ask how they can operate. And we really don't have a process for them too. So unfortunately, some of them just kind of take up shop. And if we don't have a process to restrict it, I don't really have a process to enforce it. Like I said, the hospital across the street, they've been generally pretty good with allowing food trucks to come for their employees, and it's a nice feature. But we do have started seeing them popping out in the street and things like that. There's not a lot of regulations on where we can place them either. So I think it's something that needed to be evaluated as to making sure that we are clear from, again, things like flammables, combustible gases, the buildings themselves. Food trucks can have some safety issues. Right now, when we have food truck festivals in the township or events with lots of food trucks, I go out and do a courtesy check on my own time just to kind of make sure that things look generally safe, that their extinguishers are charged, their Ansel systems are checked. I found quite a few gas lines that were loose, or the generator was pumping the CO back into the trailer, which I wouldn't enjoy, but for some reason it was set up that way. So there definitely is a need for it. It's not an ordinance in search of a problem. It's a solution for a problem that we do have.
Okay, I appreciate you being proactive then. Thank you.
Yeah, well said. Commissioner Bowman?
Thanks for bringing this to our attention, and I think it's something we should address. As far as the trucks not being on the street during, say, a person having like a graduation party or something, obviously in some towns, in some parts of the township, you can, have a driveway and take care of that. But in some parts of my town, you might have to use the street, at least for a limited time. So maybe we can just have a length of time restriction there for that.
Yeah, I believe there is a stipulation in there where it could be approved as part of that single-use event. It can be authorized by the zoning officer, and we'd obviously, whenever we put things in the street, we'd communicate with the police department as well to make sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Mostly just in the residential context.
Correct.
We're not going to allow a business to have them parked
In the street.
in the street.
Yeah.
This is if you're having something at your house, then you could be in the street for that limited period of time.
Yeah. So Chris, just to clarify, so for the single use component of this, say you're a family and you're having a high school graduation party, and as part of that, you want to have a food truck in your driveway to feed the masses that you've invited. Will that now require outreach to your office to get official approval for that truck to be on their property for that 3-hour period?
Correct.
Okay. So we'll have to do a pretty good educational campaign around this because
Yep.
this will be a change. I think it will provide benefit in the safety measures that you've indicated, but we should give some lead time to think about how to socialize this before we flip the switch.
Of course, we certainly do outreach to both the residents in the community as well as the mobile food vendors themselves. So they're aware and not signing themselves up for
Yeah.
a problem. Yep. Of course.
I mean, it'll be interesting only that if we were to proceed apace with the idea that we would move this to the May meeting to vote to advertise, that means the vote would take place in June, which would be like right before high school graduate. So it could be, I just want to make sure if we're going to do this, that we're positioned to be able to address it from the get-go, and having this approved the month where their high school graduations take place just could create a lot of work for you.
Yeah, we'll work with the township manager's office and the communications team to make sure that any sort of publicity is vetted and properly sourced out to everyone to make sure we have enough lead time to make sure we're successful in it.
Okay. Of course.
As for clarification on, so the single use and the high school graduation party and all, they would be required to obtain all the necessary permits. I think there are at least 2 permits and a business license. Would the single use vendor have to do all that too as well?
So the vendor has to obtain a license through us, regardless of whether they're going to be part of a host business or a single use. That's where they would come. They would register with us, with the tax office. They would get an inspection from someone from our team to make sure they're good. They're good for the whole year. So that's the one-time thing. So then they're licensed to operate at any of these location permits that happens. The single use permit, they would just have to apply for a single use permit to allow that food vendor to come on their site.
Okay.
jump in, but is the permit then for the person, is it the permit for the vendor or is the permit for the homeowner?
There is a food vendor permit for the vendor themselves.
Right, understood.
And then there is a
But
single-use permit for the property owner.
that would be for the property owner. Okay,
Correct.
that's helpful.
Yep.
Thank you. Commissioner Henry, and then we'll go to Commissioner Spiegelman.
Does it exist in other municipalities? Are vendors likely to already be comfortable and likely to follow this process typically?
Yes, it's pretty standard through a lot of municipalities. I know Philadelphia and quite a few in the area have their own processes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Henry. Commissioner Spiegelman?
Thank you, President Hecker. Actually, I want to jump off of one of the points you made. Chris, what would be the lead time, or what would be the buffer or whatever between adoption and enforcement for this ordinance?
From when it's adopted, I don't know if we put a date on the back of it.
I don't know if it's covered, it's like if it's covered in some standard way, like.
Yeah, the effective date is 5 days after enactment. My plan would kind of be to get everything prepared and ready before that. And then obviously, when it comes down to the enforcement, we do have our discretion in these situations to allow if someone is, I just didn't know. I try not to lay the hammer down if I don't have to.
Right.
I try to be fairly
Right.
reasonable in situations. So I know there'll be definitely a learning curve with a
Yeah.
brand new ordinance.
Well, that's what I was trying to get at, John, not to jump on your comments and get back to you, but you know, if we were to pass this in June, you have families that are working now on, and I think we would just have to be mindful of the first phase of implementation. That's all.
Of course.
That's no, and I was thinking the same thing, and no, you absolutely hit it on the head, because that is peak season. I can't tell you. I mean, you and I have both, and many others on the board have been to so many of these parties where folks have had food trucks. But Chris, I just want to compliment you. I think that this this really like straddles the line, very nicely, between between being between being reasonable and not being comprehensive without being onerous to anyone, and especially when coupled with the aforereferenced public education campaign. And then the last thing I want to say is, if this is all just some scheme to get the Cousins of Maine food truck to President Hecker's house before it comes to my house, that's not cool. It's just not cool. Now I'm hungry again. Thank you for talking about food.
Thank you, Commissioner Spiegelman.
And good evening.
Good evening, Commissioner Laney Martin.
So in reference to worrying about implementation, I think what we can do, is that for residents getting a permit for someone to come in on their property in the front, that could be a different leeway time versus the implementation for actual vendors themselves. So people who own the food truck, soon as it goes through, they have to make sure they have their paperwork correct. Just like any
Yeah,
like contractors or anyone else doing business here, they may be new to the area, but however you conduct business, you need to go and figure out and get your paperwork. I think this is great because this will also allow Abington to get revenue from businesses that are coming in mobilely to conduct transactions, and they're not required to have insurance or have pay taxes or anything towards Abington to filing, because it's all invisible because you can't see what they're doing. So I think this is great ordinance. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments or questions from members of the board? So again, I mean, the process in front of us, and solicitor, correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea, if we're so inclined, that this would be something that we would put on the May agenda to vote, to discuss, deliberate, and then ultimately vote on whether to advertise this. Okay. Okay. Any other comments or questions? Chris, thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Much
Appreciate it.
appreciated. We'll now open it up for public comment on the two items that we discussed this evening.
I have attended code court numerous times, and the wrong people are constantly there. we have a rat infestation.
Yeah,
We
we're
want to-
talking.
I am talking about this.
Well,
I'm going to
we-
talk about this.
You're gonna,
You didn't let me get a word out.
well, now you're streaming and I'm not gonna allow that here either.
No,
If you have
No,
something to say,
Don't interrupt me. I'm talking about the food trucks.
okay, then you can do
We
that.
don't have the codes to even enforce housing that is falling apart. They're not going to code court. Now you're going to take care of food trucks too. We have rats and you haven't shown any interest. Bruce Goodman, who has sat on the hospital board, has all his dumpsters open 3 months after I pointed it out. This goes on because we have no code enforcement. I've been to court. I see people going to court. Regular villagers such as me go to court, but the important people who did this type of damage with the mattresses and renting apartments that are broken aren't in court. There was a man there I saw in court. He didn't have his shed up to par, so he was in court. Is this shed up to par? No, but this is from a VIP speculator. We don't want food trucks, and I already know you're going to pass it. Because last year I met a man who worked at Firestone, and you know what he said to me? I'm going to leave Firestone. I'm going to open a food truck right over there on the corner. And I said, you're not allowed to open food trucks. He goes, we'll be allowed. We don't want the food truck. Our neighborhood is being rotted out, starting with Edmonds Road, where our commissioner lives. There are at least 4 houses that are being rotted out. I believe you want to destroy the neighborhood completely. We have rats. People complain about rats. Miss Young Gertz gets complaints about rats. I've told you people have rats. You're not doing anything about it. You're destroying my neighborhood. You're making it impossible for families to live there, but you want a hotel and 235 apartments, I believe, where my family lives and other families. Our neighborhood is in a shambles. We don't want the food truck, and I'm an artist for 41 years. And even if I got a free show at this new toll museum, I wouldn't take it. We need our neighborhoods preserved, and you're destroying them. I'm finding so much rot. It's shocking. There's hundreds of homes that are rotted, and these homeowners don't go to court. None of them go to court. You can have a collapsed roof here and not go to court. You can have no roof here and not go to court. We don't need any of this. The tolls are not doing enough. They're going to, I think, have like they're going to add one light upgrade to their neighborhood that they're going to put this 55 and up housing. It's not enough. They should be paying for traffic calming studies because they're the ones creating the issue. All these developers, the Gallmans, Mr. Goodman, anyone who wants apartments should be paying for traffic calming studies, not taxpayers, and not the county, and none of us. They're creating massive congestion. The accidents are outrageous. And you could put this wonderful museum on Old York Road. There's lots of empty storefronts. You can put this wonderful museum on Easton Road. There's lots of storefronts. We don't need it in a neighborhood. There's no reason for it to be in a neighborhood. And we can't trust you because you constantly say one thing out one side of your mouth and another thing out the other side. I've spoken to all of you and you've looked at blight and you said, I like it. Or you won't look at it at all. The blight that is all over our neighborhoods is because of you and no code enforcement. I can come here, I can take hundreds of photographs of garbage and blighted homes, and this is going to stay. And I know Mrs. Lady Martin sees it right outside her door or around the corner. It's right there. These are prominent things. This doesn't have any kind of, what's he got? Does he have is he have permission to put that there?
Okay.
No. It shouldn't be there. Rotting housing, it has to have structural integrity. These houses don't. And you're making it so families are going to live in poverty. We're going to pay very high taxes, and you're destroying my family.
Okay.
You're destroying the home we live in. The tolls can put that house, there are museums somewhere else and not inconvenience a whole bunch of people who will now have cars going up and down their streets. And they don't know who they are, and they don't have as many familiar people in the neighborhood. You definitely aren't telling us the truth about how much you're building, because rotted houses that can't even stand up are here. This is not done by regular homeowners. These are done by people who work for speculators. Rotted houses that can't stand up are in this area with collapsed roofs, no roofs, and any kind of garbage they want. We have no code enforcement because you won't allow it.
Thank you for your comments. Your time has expired.
Just say, sit down, because that's what you think of me.
Okay, so please sit down.
Villager, not the toll.
Thank you. Take your seat.
Sit down, sit down.
Let's get to it.
Good evening. I'm Bill Reardon from Roberts Avenue. Commissioner Bowl, good to see you. I've never met you. You've lived in my ward for at least the 35 years I've been there. It's the first time you and I have ever been in a meeting at the same time.
Okay.
I've said this to you guys before. You guys, and pardon me, ladies, I use that term lovingly as guys, meaning men and women. You need the wisdom of Solomon on this zoning issue, because it's a slippery slope. The minute you've made an exception, it sets a precedent. And you're gonna have to live with it. We're gonna have to live with it. We're all, I mean, the township, all of us. And I hope that your solicitor has the ability to make this a single use defined term. Mr. Toll, and I've had the pleasure of working with him in the past, wonderful man, generous. He's not going to live forever, as none of us will. And several people mentioned the Barnes Museum. Horrible, horrible story about theft. I mean, where the city of Philadelphia stole that from Lower Merion Township through Orphans Court. Oh, very much. Well, okay. We could discuss that privately. But it's a horrible story. And there's a building sitting there that there's kind of some issues of what do we do with it? I frankly, I kind of agree with this lady's comment that there's a lot of other empty buildings. And maybe, maybe they could be used for this. Mr. Toll probably wants it on his property, but I'm hoping the solicitor can come up with a solution that really makes a couple of things happen. One, that there's no fee. Because the minute you've started charging a fee in an R1 area, your comment about an R1 area, it's sacred. I almost slipped and used the word, but it is sacred. That's why we buy in an R1 area. If my neighbor wants to build a bigger garage, I want to know, and I want to have a say in whether or not that garage can encroach on the existing rules. I don't want you to change those rules without me knowing it. So, solicitor, I hope that you can come up with the half a baby that tells these folks how to make this happen, because it's a wonderful idea. Make it happen so that it's a one-time thing and it can't be undone. And that if Mr. Toll dies, or if somebody is successful in moving that collection somewhere else, that it doesn't become a building sitting here in an R1 zone that somebody's going to want to put apartments in or a retail. I mean, and look, you may say no and you wouldn't allow it, but you're not going to be sitting there either, because you're not much younger than Bruce Toll.
No, I'm actually 30-something years younger than Bruce Toll.
Well,
Who's counting?
And I used to say that, and I worked with his mom at one time, and I was the kid. And all of a sudden, I'm the 70-something guy.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, none of us are here forever. But that building will probably outlive all of us.
Of course.
So again, I wish you the best of luck. I support the concept, but I don't support a change in zoning in any respect in an R1 district. If you can find a way to exempt it so that it is usable for one use and one use only, go for it.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? And if not, we'll go to Zoom.
So Laura Lehman, Commissioner Hecker, again, you've changed the speaking rules. They're just whatever you want them to be. I might have wanted to come and speak for my 5 minutes and then leave. Okay, but we can't do that when you keep changing the rules. And so the other thing is, I don't see Mr. Markman anywhere there in the room. So he won't hear the comments from the public on his property. And in addition, you made all your decisions without hearing a single bit of public comment, even though our meetings are intended for the public to inform you and to help you formulate your positions based on the residents that you're serving. So it doesn't help us for you to do that. This particular property, is this the one on Meeting House on Susquehanna?
Yes.
So it's beyond me that you could come to this meeting and that the lawyer, I don't honestly even believe that she doesn't know where the other properties are, but she certainly just could have asked our zoning department because they have access to that information. And nobody should have come to a meeting asking for that, which would be spot zoning if it was just for that property. And in fact, it's for not just any property that currently has 10 acres, which is what she might have been looking for, but it's for any property where you can gather 10 acres together. So if you buy a couple of 3-acre properties and you have 4 of those and put them together, then you've got 10 acres. So it is improper for this to be done on the fly like this. And I do agree with those, and I thank Commissioner DePlacido for saying residents needed to know. They need to know that this is going on. There's nobody here, and you know that they would be here if they thought that this was happening in their neighborhoods, which may not be at Susquehanna and Meeting House. It may be at Woodland Road. It may be at 1209. All they need is another property or two, perhaps, to put that together. So this is just outrageous that you're doing this in this way again, complete lack of transparency to the public, where in your own email, Commissioner Hecker, you should have explained what was being done and encouraged people to come and to speak and to learn about it and to read the ordinance that you were proposing. What was the third use? That also would be a church. It also could be, there was a second use and a third use. Okay, it was a museum, a church, and what was the third use?
I think you're referencing the comment made by their attorney related to what the existing uses are in the R1 district.
Yes, is that different than the ordinance you're proposing?
Well, she was simply pointing out that there are other things that are allowable uses in R1 that are beyond simple residential homes. And that
So-
we're not changing that. That's what's there today.
Okay, so we're adding the museum, not a standard ordinance section that had museum and church and something else. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're not adding, I mean, the church and schools
Okay.
are things that are already there. This is specific to the museum use.
Okay, all right. I appreciate that. I didn't understand that. So that, of course, also, would add a different aspect altogether. And I want to add one more thing about the beautiful cultural aspect of this. If you look up online, Rotting from Within in the Inquirer section, you will find a section on Toll Brothers houses. And while Mr. Toll was collecting his wonderful art collection, there were people who bought his houses who were desperately trying to figure out how to live in them because they were faulty and they were basically just getting dismissed. Nothing was being done. And I have heard that all over. So we have, for me, to hear somebody bragging about their art collection while the people that they sold a house to can't get any recompense from what they lost by buying one of those houses is a travesty. So I will tell you that,
Ms. Lehman, I'm going to ask you to wrap up, so please conclude your comments.
Okay, I want to just tell you what Adele's saying in terms of we have a code department that cannot deal with the code that it has now. So if you're going to add food trucks in, that you have to consider, and you should be not only notifying all the people that would be affected by this R1 issue, but also notifying caterers and food businesses that should know that food trucks are going to come in and
Yeah,
take
well,
business.
well, and I think that was the point about the notification period. So we agree with that. Thank you. And with that, well, I don't think there's anyone else that wishes to speak. And so with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.